All right, class. Today we're going to go over some tips for Essay 1. Your mind should be focused on Essay 1 and getting it written and handed in. So I want to give you some last-minute tips and tricks for getting the grade that you want. Of course, there are no promises, right? But if you follow these rules that I'm about to show you, you will have an easier time getting the grade that you wanted than you would otherwise. So I will share with you my screen now. Whoops, that's the wrong one. 1 second. There we go. Okay, good. All right, so here are the tips for Essay 1. They're in no particular order in terms of importance. Number 1, always have a strong thesis statement. I cannot emphasize enough how important the thesis statement is in terms of the writing process. If you don't have a good thesis statement, it's like trying to navigate a trail or walk through some national forest without a map. You're going to have a hard time. If you don't have a thesis statement, you get lost, you get all over the place. So even though it's only one sentence, and sometimes two in very rare circumstances, the more time you spend developing the thesis statement and making sure it is exactly the way you want it, the better. Number 2 goes hand in hand with number 1. Always have a strong topic sentences which relate to the thesis statement directly. Number 3 is don't neglect the title. The title is part of the attention getter. It's a part of the hook. You can use the title to get people's attention the same way you would use the actual first few sentences of your intro paragraph. So don't neglect the title. A good format is title subtitle format. So you start with the title, then you give me a subtitle that explains it a little more. For example, I had a student that wrote an essay one time called Help the Kelp, how restoring kelp forests is crucial for the environment. So their title was Help the Kelp, which was good because it had that little rhyme in there and it was catchy. And then it had a colon and it gave a subtitle which explained what the essay would be about, which in this case was the importance of kelp forests and protecting them for the environment. So a good title helps with the hook. It helps with the attention-getting process, and so you don't want to neglect it. Number 4, make sure to follow the formula hook, line, and sinker for the intro paragraphs. Be careful of fake quotes if you're trying to use them for a hook. I just put that in there because of all of the potential fake quotes on the internet. You want to be careful of stuff on the internet, but you do want to get people's attention. A quote is one way to do it. A vividly described anecdote is another way to do it. Really descriptive imagery, powerful statistics, those kinds of things. You want to get people's attention. You want to get them invested. Remember that formal writing is a snooze fest. And do think of your dear professor when you're writing these essays. I do have to read them, and so if they're extremely boring, well, that would be kind of painful. So the catchier you can make it, the better. Follow hook, line, and sinker for that intro paragraph. The hook is the attention getter. The line is the relevant context that you use to establish the thesis statement. And then the sinker, of course, is the thesis statement itself. It goes at the very end of the intro paragraph, 1 to 2 sentences. Number 5, avoid the use of first-person pronouns, I, me, and my. This is a huge one that students have a hard time getting over. Why do we discourage the use of the first person? There's a few reasons. Number 1, referring to yourself in the first person invites you to give conjecture or opinion. And in formal writing, your opinion is not really that important. What is important is what you can show, what you can prove. So referring to I think, I feel, doesn't really matter what you think and feel in a lot of cases. It just matters what you can show, what you can demonstrate. The other reason that we don't like pronouns, first-person pronouns, is because they imply a certain amount of expertise. If you reference yourself as a thinker, it's because you have some kind of credential in the area that you're referencing yourself. Of course, you guys are students. You're going to school to accrue credentials and get them, but you don't have them right now. So saying I, me, my doesn't really bring anything to the table. There's always a way to get rid of first-person pronouns and to rephrase everything. So please be on the lookout for those. I don't go super hard on that in the first essay, but it is a rule that you're going to hear me repeat over and over again. Try to avoid those first-person pronouns. If you have a draft already and there's a bunch of I, me, and my, try to figure out a way to get to tone it down a little bit. Remember, your personal stories and personal stuff is not that important. What's important is what you can show. Can you use the strategy effectively? Can you create a thesis statement? That kind of thing. Number 6 is avoid cliches and colloquialisms. A lot of times we use these, we don't even realize it, right? We have tons of cliches and little things that we say every day that take the place of a more elaborately articulated meaning. So what I mean by that is if I were to say something bad were to happen, let's say that I dropped my Domino's pizza face down on the floor. And I looked up and I said, well, that's the way the cookie crumbles. Everyone knows what I mean, right? But there's no cookie. There's no cookie involved. This is a pizza. This has nothing to do. So cliches and colloquialisms are expressions that we use and sort of things that we say in common everyday speech, which take the place of articulation, which take the place of clearly expressing exactly what it is that you mean. What did I mean in that circumstance? I meant, well, I dropped my pizza and there was nothing I could do to prevent it, so there's no reason in crying about it. That's what I really meant, but in order to convey that, I said that's the way the cookie crumbles. If you have a bunch of cliches and colloquialisms in your essay, it just doesn't sound very formal, right? It doesn't sound like you're trying to express yourself in the most clear way. They're kind of shortcuts. They're shortcuts for meaning and trying to convey things to people, and sometimes they don't always work. So try to get rid of them. Avoid any kind of informal speech. That's number 7. So that includes slang and stuff like that. Also, try not to include humor in your essays. I love humor. I'm a big humor guy. You guys have probably already picked up that about my personality. But don't try to joke with me if you can avoid it. Some students are tempted to do so, and I would caution against it. No, number 8 is avoid passive voice. So for this one, I'm going to have to take you over here to the Purdue OWL. Now, I'm not going to go super into this, but the Purdue OWL talks about a lot of things to help with the writing process, and active versus passive voice is very important. Active voice is used for most non-scientific writing. Use active voice for the majority of your sentences to make the meaning clear for readers and keep the sentence from becoming too complicated or wordy. So passive voice is basically, I'll explain it to you. So active voice is where the action passive voice is where the action is performed upon the subject. So in this one, it says the entrance exam was failed by over 1/3 of the applicants to the school. So the active way to say that would be over 1/3 of the applicants to the school failed the entrance exam. Now you see, we eliminated some of the words and we made it to where the subject itself is what's performing the action. That is, 1/3 of the applicants are failing. They are performing the action. So it's much more clear. It's much more direct. Here's another one. The brakes were slammed on by her as the car sped downhill. Now you can just hear how awkward that one is, right? The brakes were slammed on by her. That doesn't have any ring. So how do we want to say it? We want to say it with active voice. We say, she slammed on the brakes as the car sped downhill. Much better. The next one is, your bicycle has been damaged by agent omitted. I guess he works for the CIA. That's a joke. And then, so actually the agent was I have damaged your bicycle, right? Action on the bill is being considered by the committee. The committee is considering action on the bill. Sometimes it doesn't really shorten it very much, but it does make it stronger because the subject performs the action, and that carries with it a more assertive tone. By then, the soundtracks will have been completely remixed by the sound engineers. Is that such a thing, sound engineers? By then, the sound engineers will have completely remixed the soundtrack. So this is just very brief explanation of passive versus active voice. If you want to look into it, there's a lot of stuff on the Purdue OWL, not just this page, but there are other exercises and things you can do if you want to make sure you have a firm grasp of active versus passive voice. Try to eliminate the passive voice. Not the worst thing that can happen to you, but the more you eliminate it and the more you replace it with active voice, the stronger your writing will inevitably be. Okay, avoid wordiness. Try to say more with less. I always say that, say more with less. A lot of people will use tons of words to say something very simple. This is not really what you want to do. There are also some exercises on the Purdue OWL to help with wordiness. If you know that wordiness is a problem for you, you might want to go check those out. They have some exercises, some things you can do. It'll say eliminate words without changing the meaning. If you can eliminate words without changing the meaning, you should, because conciseness is very good when you're trying to communicate effectively. Now you might say, well, there's 1,000 word limit. I need to have as many words as possible. Yeah, but if you have a bunch of words that don't actually say anything or don't actually carry the meaning forward, it doesn't really help you that much. It's not what you want to do. Number 10 is be careful with commas. People overuse commas. The main reason that we have commas is to separate clauses in sentences, particularly separate independent clauses and dependent clauses. Sometimes we use a comma to separate two dependent clauses as long as there is a coordinating conjunction involved. But again, if you know that commas are a problem, you might want to take a look at the Purdue OWL. I can show you. We just type in Purdue OWL commas, and boom, it's going to pull up all sorts of stuff. Commas quick rules, right? These are all the quick rules for commas. So use commas to separate independent clauses when they are joined by any of the coordinating conjunctions. Use commas after introductory clauses, phrases, or words that come before the main clause, such as foremost, comma, right? Use a pair of commas in the middle of the sentence to set off clauses, phrases, or words that are non-essential to the meaning of the sentence. And so all of this stuff, I mean, I'll just let you know that this is here, and you can go and make sure. If the most grammatical issues I have are with the comma. The comma is a tricky one. So this is available to you. Purdue OWL, it's under general writing, punctuation, commas. You can look at these 10 rules. Use commas to separate 3 or more words. Use commas to separate 2 or more coordinate adjectives that describe the same noun. Use a comma near the end of a sentence to separate contrasted coordinate elements or to indicate a pause or shift. Use commas to set off phrases at the end of a sentence that refer back to the beginning or middle. Some of this gets really complicated, right? Use commas for geographical names, that sort of thing. So you can check this stuff out on your own time. If you know that you struggle with the comma, there's a very specific point that we have to use a comma, and it's to indicate a pause, but it isn't necessarily when you pause, right? If you pause while writing, that doesn't mean put a comma down. So make sure that you're going by the rules. There are some very strict rules for commas. Okay. Word variance. Make sure that you use different words and different phrases. Don't say the same words and phrases over and over again. A good way to detect whether or not you're using the same phrases over and over again is to read the essay out loud to yourself. If you read it out loud to yourself, a lot of times you can hear those things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to see just reading it quietly. And if you use the same words over and over again, the same phrases, try to get some synonyms in there, maybe trim a few of the uses of that word, try to find a way to avoid it. I would caution against using a thesaurus, because when you use a thesaurus, a lot of the times the word that you pick to replace with the thesaurus is not an accurate not 100% accurate synonym. So for example, if you look up in a thesaurus, the words death and sleep are synonymous, right? Because sometimes we refer to death as the big sleep, right? But death and sleep are not the same thing, not really. It's only in that very specific context that they are synonyms. So there's a lot of words like that that are synonyms only in specific contexts, or not, they're not completely. There's a asterisk that you should be aware of. So use word variance, but try to avoid the thesaurus. Use your own vocabulary if you can, because it's just safer to do that. Number 12, be careful to adhere to MLA format. Always make sure you look up the formatting, okay? Some of you guys are going to think, oh, I've got this down, and try to do it from memory, and you're going to get a lot of stuff wrong, and you're going to get a lot of points taken off. You're going to be frustrated. Go and look at that quick guide that's in the Writing Resources folder on Blackboard. Go and check it out. Make sure you got everything down. You got your 1-inch margins, Times New Roman 12-point font, header, heading, title, in-text parenthetical citations, and a works cited page. That's just the bare minimum. There's other stuff too. It gets very complicated. My advice to you would be to look everything up manually instead of relying on a citation machine. Lots of students like to rely on the citation machine, but it's not the best resource because sometimes you screw it up. The computer, they think they know everything. They don't actually know everything. So please be careful of that. Please be wary of using sources for Essay 1. Sources, meaning secondary sources, are not required for Essay 1, but if you use secondary sources, you have to cite them. And if you're going to use secondary sources, my advice to you would be to use Galileo. So just to find Galileo here, I'll show you on the main page. there's this little link over here on the left that says Access Galileo. Galileo is basically a search engine that's going to pre-screen most of the search results for some level of academic credibility. It doesn't mean that everything from Galileo is perfect, but it means that it's better than just the general internet, because there's a lot of crap on the internet. And this is why I caution against you using sources to begin with, because I haven't really taught you how to do it. Now, for the second essay, you're going to be required to find at least 2, if not 3 sources, and maybe even more, depending on what you're trying to do. So that source integration will be critical, and you will learn how to do that. But if you're feeling brave, and some of you are, and you want to try to get sources, then please use Galileo. Don't just use a Google search. There is so much crap on the internet, and I will tell you about that ad nauseum, which means till you vomit, in the future. But for now, just know that this exists. There is a link on the main course page of Blackboard over here on the left. It says Access Galileo. You click on that, it takes you to this. It's like a Google page. You type in something, it's going to give you some search results. If you're feeling brave, I would say just be careful, and if you want to just ignore the sources altogether, that's probably the safest bet, because you will lose points if you use a source that isn't credible. Whoops, sorry about that. All right, let's see. Don't repeat yourself in the conclusion. I skipped over that one. Don't repeat yourself in the conclusion. Achieve the tone of closure in the conclusion. Address open-ended speculations and make predictions. But this idea that you should just restate everything that's been said already is dumb. I don't like that idea. I know you've been told that by every teacher you've ever had. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because why would you have to restate your argument after you've already made it for 3 or 4 pages? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. So what you really want to do is leave your reader thinking. You have a lot of freedom in the conclusion. You can ask questions, you can make predictions, you can do lots of other things, bring in other peripheral subjects that may not directly relate. There's a lot that you can do in the conclusion, but just please don't repeat yourself, and please don't say in conclusion. I know as sure as I say that, don't say in conclusion, comma, about, I don't know, 80% of the essays are going to be in conclusion, comma, everything I've already said. It's the way it goes. So I'm telling you right now, don't repeat yourself, don't say in conclusion. You can do with that what you will. Number 14, be wary of using sources. If you must use sources, use Galileo. I already said that. Number 15, if you do use sources, make sure to have a lead-in statement for your quotes. So a lot of times students will just put the quote and it'll just fall out of the sky into the essay. Boom, quote falls out of the sky. You always want to have a lead-in statement, such as, according to one scholar, or as one expert suggests, and then you include the quote, and that gives me some frame of context. I know, oh, okay, this is a quote from an expert or a scholar, so that's why they're including this. It's not just something that comes out of the sky. It's called an alien landing, I refer to it. You'll hear me say that again. Number 16, if you do include sources, make sure they are correctly paraphrased, quoted, and cited according to MLA format. If you don't do this, you will get a plagiarism violation. Somebody out there is going to get a plagiarism violation for Essay 1. Just make sure it isn't you. If you do all the quotations and citations and you resist the temptation to steal things from the internet without telling me, you're going to do just fine. Number 17, if sources are used, be sure to include a works cited page. Always look up how to cite the sources on the Purdue OWL or the MLA Quick Guide on Blackboard. If you guess, it will be wrong. A lot of people try to guess, or they'll just put like a hyperlink to the web page and stuff. There's very specific citation information that varies with each individual source. So if you don't look that up, you're probably going to get it wrong, and you're going to get points taken off, and you're going to be annoyed. MLA is very tricky. It's not something you want to phone in. It's worth 20% of the essay grade. So if we don't do that, it's not good. You're starting out at a B if you have lousy MLA. Okay, let's see. Anything else that I want to tell you about? Not that I can think of. I'm sure there's other things. So if you have any questions, go ahead and let me know, and make sure that you go by the syllabus when determining what day the essay is due. Other than that, have a wonderful week, weekend, whatever, and I'll be here if you need me. Take care.